I'm going to be comparing the Back to the Future trilogy to the Hellboy franchise because in part one of this series, I compared Back to the Future to Narnia, Back to the Future 1. I compared Hellboy to Kick-Ass, Hellboy 1. So now I'm going to compare Back to the Future and Hellboy. I've seen every Back to the Future movie. I've watched the 2004 Hellboy movie along with the sequel Golden Army, but I've not seen Hellboy Crooked Man or the 2019 movie. When it comes to the highest score for each franchise, the original Back to the Future has a 93%. Hellboy 2 The Golden Army has an 86%. When you look at lowest score, Back to the Future Part 2 only has a 63%. Hellboy 2019 only has a 17%. When you look at average score, Back to the Future has an average of 79. Hellboy has an average of 55. When you look at gap between lowest and highest score, you got gap of 30% in the case of Back to the Future and a gap of 64 in the case of Hellboy. Back to the Future has won every round so far, so it's going to be winning no matter what. And in this case, I'm going to choose Back to the Future. It's not actually very difficult for me. For one, I've seen every single Back to the Future movie, and on top of that, these are classic sci-fi time travel movies from Robert Zemeckis. Yes, the first two Hellboy movies are from Guillermo del Toro. I definitely like him as a director, but I think it's pretty clear that Back to the Future is more consistent than Hellboy. If the worst movie in your franchise is Back to the Future Part 2, you're in a good place, because I don't think it's all that bad of a movie. I still find it fun and entertaining, but it definitely has more problems when compared to Back to the Future Part 1 and 3. For one, it feels like the filmmakers didn't know what to do with Jennifer, because she gets in the car right at the beginning of the movie with Doc and Marty to go to the future, but then she's put asleep by Doc pretty quickly, and she stays asleep until she ends up waking up, going into her future house, and then she sees her future self and passes out. So she's asleep again, and then she comes back right at the end when Marty goes back to his own time, his own home. Also, when you think about it, once Marty and Doc arrive in alternate version of Hill Valley, where Biff's in charge of everything, and it's this really bleak future, we hear 3 times about how old Biff gave young Biff the sports almanac, which changed history. Yeah, we get the same information repeated to us 3 different times. First of all, Doc explains what's going on to Marty, and then Marty goes to alternate power hungry version of Biff, who tells him that some old guy who I didn't know came to me, gave me this book, told me to kill anyone who came looking for it. And then when Marty and Doc go back to the time of the first film, Marty is in the back of the car when old Biff gives the almanac to young Biff. So we see the thing we already had explained to us 2 times. Also, by the end of the movie, Marty and Doc go back to the time of the first film, and we're literally watching events from the first movie from a different perspective. When you combine that with the fact that you have a hoverboard chase at the beginning, which is so similar to the one from the first film, the only difference is just you're talking about electric skateboards versus physical skateboards that are non-electronic. So overall, to me, Back to the Future feels like the movie in this trilogy that's the least distinct. It's not really doing much different. It's more leeching off the other 2 movies rather than having its own identity. Back to the Future Part 3 actually has its own identity because we're in the West. That's quite a different time. Also, I like that Back to the Future Part 3 explores Doc's character more by actually having him meet a girl that he has feelings for, and thus there's actually conflict for him, because the logical part of him is saying that we need to go back to our own time. I can't stay here, but in his heart, he actually wants to stay at that time to be with Claire. Also, I think the way Back to the Future Part 3 ends is satisfying. It feels like the right way to close out this trilogy. Also, I like how in Back to the Future Part 3, when you get to the end, you have this moment where Marty is about to race this bully character. You realize that originally Marty did race this guy, which led to him getting into an accident, which really hurt his life. In Back to the Future Part 2, we see the consequences of Marty being goaded into racing this guy. But then in Back to the Future Part 3, Marty actually does something different. He actually makes the right decision and does not race this guy, thus changing his life for the better. That's a good payoff, I would say. The first movie is just really well written. I think these characters are ones I like spending time with. They're a lot of fun to watch. Marty, Doc. Also, there's good humor in these movies. There's good visuals in here. Overall, I think visually these Back to the Future movies hold up well. It's not like the Terminator first film where I go, yeah, visually speaking, this movie hasn't exactly aged all that well. There's specific moments in here where it comes off as dated. That's not the case with Back to the Future. Now, I'm a fan of Hellboy 1 from 2004 as well as Hellboy 2 The Golden Army. I like the world building in here, the lore and mythology that's set up. These are characters I like spending time with. I go, yeah, this is a world I'd like to explore more. I like the stories these two movies are telling about Hellboy trying to figure out his place in this world, trying to figure out his purpose, figure out who his friends are, who he can trust, and also trying to defeat these enemies, like the relationship he has with these other characters. There's good visuals in here. I think the stories are quite engaging. The action is rather fun. But I haven't heard good things about the 2019 Hellboy movie or Crooked Man, so I haven't actually seen those. Thus, yeah, at the end of the day, I'm going to have to go with Back to the Future, because while I appreciate that Hellboy is a different kind of comic book movie that's not like Marvel, DC, any of the big mainstream stuff, Back to the Future just is more consistent. So that's the franchise I'm going to pick. And thus, it's one every round. Bye, everyone.